each other in this debate. If you say sensible gun control, others hear code for you're taking away my guns. If you say protect my gun rights, others will call you a murderer. I say let's make it simple. We need to harden soft targets. Big companies do this already. They're surrounded by guards. So should schools. It's a trillion-dollar industry waiting to happen. Bring back psychiatric hospitals. Right now, they house less than 1/10 of the people they did 60 years ago. A Florida agency looked at this latest creep in 2016, but they let him go. Do you want to bet it was based on space, that he wasn't worth a bed? We also must slash the media footprint of killers and reduce the appeal for infamy. Creeps obsess over the fame of previous creeps. It's their drug. Let's take away that drug. We need to think offensively. Instead of asking, how do we rig the system to stop perps from getting guns? Ask, how do we tag the perps and keep them from getting guns? We want to get the bad eggs, not the law-abiding ones. You see the difference? Florida was preventable. The fiend was all red flags. Perfect for a database of nuts and perps who shouldn't get guns. This guy had no violent felonies, so a civil tag is what could have nailed him. Based on testimony from cops, students, school officials, a judge could then issue a civil court order. Rather than defensively cast a wide net that catches tons of fish we don't want, you tag the right people who are placed into one single database along with violent felons. If you're in it, no gun. And you violate the database, that's mandatory prison time. So this isn't just see something, say something. It's actually do something. So by all means, protest. But it won't do much when you're targeting the haystack while letting the needles slip through. You know, we learned about the FBI screw-up, Kimberly.
Yeah.
And now about this Florida mental health agency that had examined this guy in 2016, but they didn't hospitalize him. The article I read didn't say why, but I'm assuming if there was room for him, why not hold him for 72 hours? They didn't even do that.
Yeah, and that's the problem. So they're going to have to do some analysis on that. They're going to have to go back and talk to the people who was in charge of intake, who was the supervisor on duty, who actually had contact, you know, with him and made that determination. That's the only way we're going to get better, unless you do these kind of like thoughtful, deliberate and, you know, deep probing investigations to figure out how we can do it better for the next time, because this cannot continue to happen, especially when someone is basically screaming out for help, presenting these problems, having this like a violent, you know, ideation and saying that they want to become a school shooter. They have the weapons, they have the means and ability to do so. They go in and they're in front of a mental health professional. The FBI has them on the screen. So it wasn't just like on one level that this was a fail. It's on multiple levels that people could have caught this and stopped it and kept him in.
Yeah.
And held him. But maybe 72 hours, Greg, and then out again.
He was self-harming, Juan, I guess, on Snapchat in saying he was going to buy. I mean, this guy had more red flags than, I don't know, a red flag factory.
Right.
And we talk about, like, we look at Vegas. I don't know how we could have prevented that. That guy capitalized on obscurity. You know, no one knew. But here, this is a guy basically telling you what he's going to do, and nobody listened.
Well, the question is whether or not you take him seriously and, of course, his civil liberties, because what we know is going back to the 80s and
Reagan,
even earlier, right? Well, that was the point, that they deinstitutionalized people, and they said, you know what, folks have a right to not have their freedoms taken away because you deem them to be somehow mentally incompetent. We're not sure who you're picking on, who you're not picking on, et cetera. But I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's a danger, an increasing danger to the society when you have so many. It's not only people who are, you know, of a murderous instinct, but I think that we have high rates of people who, for example, veterans who have, you know, traumatic syndrome as homeless people. And I see more homeless people all over the country, to me, than ever. And I think that's a lot of mental illness. I will say I think it's great that the young people are willing to march in Washington. I think that hopefully it will change the tenor of the debate, because maybe if young people are saying you've got to do something, it will appeal to people who, as you point out, are just locked into, oh, you're going to take my guns, or you're going to... People say, wait, you know what? Gun owners, NRA members, think that background checks can be done better. And President Trump has now said today, or his aides have said, that he's interested in doing something to strengthen our background checks.
Well, to that point, Jesse, I think it's important that these like suggestions that I made and other people, like I think David French wrote a good piece for National Review on
gun violence restraining orders?
Yes, that it comes from the conservative libertarian side, because nobody trusts it coming from the other side, because everybody's we hear the dog whistle that they're coming to take the guns away, right?
It's true. It's like a pre-9/11 mindset when it comes to school shootings. After 9/11, everybody realized they were stovepiping all of this information. All these other agencies weren't sharing anything with each other. But now you have the police, the school, the Department of Children and Families. Everybody knows something, even the FBI, and no one's sharing this information. So you look at a threat matrix on a kid like this. He's diagnosed autistic. He's diagnosed depressed. He's diagnosed mentally unstable by the agency that looked at him, and someone who was an at-risk adult because of mental instability. He was developmentally disabled, and you have a mobile crisis unit that is dispatched to the school. He's expelled for violent behavior at the school. The police are called dozens of times to the house. If you add that up, all those different things, and you say, you know, if someone qualifies for 60% of all those things, then maybe they don't get a gun.
Yeah,
maybe you make him wait a few years before he's able to purchase a weapon like that at that age. So obviously we need gun control, but it shouldn't be taking guns away from people or not manufacturing the AR-15. We can't even ban gun bump stocks after Vegas, but we should increase background checks and make sure the information is shared appropriately.
Yeah, I think the worry is that whenever gun control comes up, the law-abiding gun owner thinks it's about them, and the idea is to switch it. So you're saying, no, it's almost like stop and frisk or community policing, but applying to this.
Yes, I think so. And I actually think that it's not necessarily a congressional move here, because the states are the policy innovators and the incubators, and I would think that this is mostly a states' rights issue. So it's not like you would have to wait for Congress and D.C. to actually move forward on something like gun violence restraining orders or these red flag laws. You could actually do that in Tallahassee, and that could happen in Florida, or you might do it in another state, and that's an experiment. That's where all the experiments happen in the states, and then you can figure out a way if you want to move it forward. Sometimes the federal government will do things like tying transportation funds in order to get a state to comply with something like the drinking age or something like that. But if this were to work in a certain place, if you try it out somewhere, and you have somebody like the mother from Connecticut in Sandy Hook, she tried to get help. She didn't know where to go. There's also a real concern about cuts to Medicaid, which is where a lot of people get their mental health help if they're going to get any. I hadn't heard the autism diagnosis, and I think that I don't know enough about it, and I think that there's a tendency to then extrapolate that into others. But I would say this on the communication standpoint. The kids staying in this story makes it very hard for the media to ignore it. So they know that. And I think they've been pretty smart. They're working together. They're using their social networks in order to gather, not just in Tallahassee. They're calling for a march on March 24th. That sounds weird. A march on March 24th. And the more they stay in this story, it will be harder for people to ignore. But I don't necessarily think that this is just a congressional issue. I think that you can get more done faster at the state level.
Yeah, the thing is, I think the media doesn't have to be. This is a highly visual protest, especially if it's going to be nationwide and the Women's March is getting behind it, which is then going to raise suspicions that it's more of a political event if the Women's March.
And a liberal one.
And a liberal one. And I think that's an error. That's an error. And also an error to continually talk about repealing the Second Amendment, because that's never going to happen. But you hear that. I think if the media maybe focused on why he wasn't placed in the hospital, how did the FBI drop the ball, as well as these protests.
Right, but you want to make sure that this isn't going to be, a direct, full-on assault on the Second Amendment and a gun grab, because then that's, it's right, but given the political differences and ideological differences, to try to use this as a vehicle to try to confiscate guns. And there's situations where somebody can just make a complaint against a neighbor or something like that, and then you have to be very careful in terms of the guidelines.
And that's it'll be like...
take someone's weapon
once you
away.
get on the list,
how
like
would you?
What's the adjudication in order to get off of it? And that will be hard. But again, I think that one of the states could start this.
And it's civil. And if it's a civil, tag, that means the bar's lower, and it's about these people. It's about the guy that you know. It's like nobody knows what to do with the problem.
Kimberly mentioned the a state agency that went and visited this guy after he was posting pictures on social media of him cutting himself and saying he wanted to do violence and buy a gun. He was wearing long sleeves at the time, and the reason they didn't involuntarily commit him was because they never even checked and looked at his sleeves. Hey, dude, pull your sleeves up. I mean, it's a really pathetic visit by the state agency, I think.
You know, but that's what happens. If not thorough, and they're pressed, and they have so many cases, and then they go in and they do a rush. I mean, I won't even tell you about a case that I know. I mean, anyway, they didn't even check this little girl who had been beaten, and her scalp was duct taped back on, and they left her in the house.
You know, Juan, you brought up vets and the problems that they have. There's a positive argument on how to use vets. This is from Tyrus, who's a co-host on my show, brought up this as a practical solution.
When 9/11 happened, the planes hit the towers, airports were changed forever. We got the TSA. Our children are getting hit. It's time to change the schools forever. And there is a population out there, and I checked, they didn't have the new stats out, but last year's stats was 4.3% unemployment for returning veterans in this country. That's 435,000 trained men who have eyes and ears. We need to have them at the schools.
Is that a good, I mean...
I like it.
I think it's a great idea. What do you think, Juan?
Well, I know the criticism is that if you police the schools so intensely, then everything that a young person does becomes a criminal act rather than a teenager acting out, because all of a sudden there's a cop there and now there's a criminal record. And so essentially you are, you know, institutionalizing the school in a way that I don't think schools are intended. Kids are allowed to act out.
But if I understand what Tyrus is saying, they wouldn't be there in order to have disciplinary action oversight. They would just be there to protect.
Well, that'd be ideal, but what happens is if you have police there, then I think the school authorities go to the police. But I think let me just say, the bigger point to me is the one that you were talking about earlier, which is basically people get locked in to their political boxes right here. And that people will say, you're coming for my guns. Now, to my mind, when I think about the NRA and its role here, I don't see how you get away from it, because they are so heavily politicized and they put so many dollars into Republican candidates. They back Republicans.
I think the NRA influence is a little overrated, because unions and Planned Parenthood give a lot more money. But if any president could do something on this issue, I think Donald Trump could. He's very supportive of the Second Amendment, and if he wants to give a little on background checks, I think the country would be open to it.
Yeah, absolutely. The question is, would his right wing be open to it? Would the NRA be open to it? Because I think that so many, in the case of gun owners, are single-issue voters, and that's the only issue. They see the whole world through that prism and are easily threatened. And I think that if Trump, if others, if the NRA was finally to say, listen, here is a reasonable step that we can get behind, it would make a huge difference. Because remember, we didn't get bump stocks. We haven't had any added steps in terms of the mental illness issue that Greg's talking about today. Medicare, as Dana was talking about, less opportunities for coverage for mental health issues. To me, this is right staring us in the face. We don't have to wonder about it.
Yeah, it's just that we haven't really had good practical solutions from the loudest voices. When you even look at what the ACLU came out against the Obama bill because of it was a defensive move. It was casting a wide net on people who can't fill out their Social Security benefits because of a disability. This crowd is not the type of crowd that shoots up schools. So anyway, President Trump's tweet storm over Mueller's indictments in the Russia probe. That's next.
Today, we're finally getting our bathtub redone. We weren't happy.
So keep your love locked down, your love locked down, keeping your love locked down.
This weekend, President Trump chided the FBI for missing warnings on the accused Florida gunman and spending too much time instead on the Russia probe. He fired off more than a dozen tweets after the special counsel's indictments of Russians for meddling with our election. He also is continuing his terror on President Obama for failing to stop Moscow from interfering with our vote. Quote, Obama was president up to and beyond the 2016 election, so why didn't he do something about Russian meddling? Even Democrat Adam Schiff agrees with him.
I've said all along that I thought the Obama administration should have done more. At that time, we couldn't get the Obama administration to acknowledge the Russian interference. They were very wary of appearing to be putting their hand on the scale in the election. Now, they did make an acknowledgement the following month, but I don't think that was sufficient.
Okay, Dana, so interesting. Strange bedfellows.
Well, I'm just saying it's thumb on the scale, not hand on the scale.
Yes.
Just a little, you know.
He has a tiny hand.
Okay, let's see. On the Obama administration, that is one of the underreported stories of the last year. That while there's been a huge focus on the Mueller probe, that if you go back to now, we know that in 2014, that was when Russia started this operation to come after us in our elections in all sorts of different ways. This is at the same time that they're invading Ukraine. And so the Obama administration would say, we're really focused on the fact we're trying to protect the actual people. They don't get ahead of this one. And I think that, you know, history will have to decide what it will on that front. There are a lot of people on the Democratic side very frustrated that not more was done. I look back, though, and I think, I don't know what more could have been done in the middle of it, because I understand the sensitivity about not getting in the middle of the election and acting like the Russians were trying to help President Trump, and then it would look like Obama was trying to help Hillary. So that's another reason why there are a lot of people that want Mueller to finish his investigation at least in the late spring, because the later you get, then you're getting involved in another election, this time the midterm elections of 2018.
Sure.
On the other front, I think that talking about the FBI being distracted by doing too much on Russia, and that's why it couldn't prevent 17 children from being murdered, like a fine line for a pundit and not a good one for a president. If the president believes that the Mueller indictment of the 13 Russians was good news for him, he should just let that sit. Instead, it stirred the pot even more and made the story.
Especially if you lose, you're quickly forgotten. The Democrats
or you don't know
now,
what it is.
Yeah.
Maybe people not following that.
Curling? What's the Olympic event?
I know it is.
Smart.
Yeah.
Anyway, for the Dems, their collusion obsession is their curling. But unlike the athlete, they don't have a backup yet, and they got to get a backup. If they're planning everything on a very specific event, like the Russian collusion with a low chance of payoff, they're going to lose big. That's for the Democrats. For the Republicans, last year, or maybe a year and a half ago, I said this: do not take satisfaction in Russians' hacking of DNC or Podesta, because it's going to happen to all of us. They will try, because the Russians, you know, it's true. The Russians do not play favorites. They play the hand that they have. And right now, they were going after the Dems and the RNC, but it was easier in the Dems. The Russians realized they're 1/8 the size that they used to be. It's not about territory. It's about broadband. So this is to my more scary point. People bring up paper ballots. We talked about this to combat this intrusion. We don't have that remedy for our banking system. We don't have paper ballots for our banking system or for our electric grid. So when somebody hacks that stuff, then it's over. That's what scares me, is that it's not about just the marginal attacks on our election system. We do that already. I mean, we do that to ourselves. We're as negative as they are to ourselves. I'm worried about what happens when they parallelize our banking system, when you can't get money out of your ATM. Then we all end up robbing each other.
I thought you keep it in your mattress. Okay.
I do. My pillow, actually.
It's all gone.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
I sleep on nothing but my pillows filled with catheters.
Oh, my God.
Two advertising plugs right there.
Thanks. Yeah, move on.
What does that say about the audience?
Control room says move on. Yes. Okay. Don't make a mess of it like
I would
Fergie
say,
did.
looking back, Russia should have helped Hillary. And here's why. Obama was soft on Russia. He let him take over Ukraine. He let Assad run wild. He gave the Iranians $1 billion or so in cash. And, you know, they ran wild during his administration. Trump comes in, energy's soaring, we're now beating them in energy production. We sent missiles right on their doorstep to Syria, and, you know, we slapped some sanctions on them. So going back to, I think we're overstating the whole issue when it comes to this interference. They spent $40,000 on Facebook ads. Hillary and Trump spent $81 million. And if you talk about the propaganda that was injected into this election, think about the corruption that really happened. CNN and Donna Brazil gave information to questions to Hillary beforehand. The NBC leaked the locker room talk tape. There was a lot of really dirty stuff that went on through the media and through Hillary. The dossier, I would argue, was more impactful than a few Russian bots on Twitter. That infected the entire mainstream media. they reported that Trump was a traitor for the last 3 months of the election. So just imagine if Donald Trump had paid a foreign agent millions of dollars to bring Russian dirt and pump it into Fox News and smear Hillary as a traitor. He would have been the biggest colluder ever. Hillary actually did that on the other side, and no one wants to talk about that.
Come on.
Well, what stands out to me this afternoon is that the president over the weekend went on a Twitter rage. I mean, he was upset about something, and he's blaming Democrats. He's blaming the FBI. He did not see the result of the indictment last week of the Russians in the way that he had hoped to. He'd hoped that it was somehow, because he said it was going to vindicate him, but he didn't. Over the weekend, he hears people saying, no, guess what? The Russians may have unwittingly, but they were, in fact, involving Trump officials in their efforts. And to Jesse's point, well, if he wants to take action right now, Jesse, he could implement the sanctions that were passed by Congress and that he's sitting on. He's not punishing the Russians with something that's right before him. And don't forget, when you talk about the impact of what the Russians did, there's the email hacking. They went after the Clinton speeches, remember that? They even got inside the Democratic campaign because they tried to exacerbate tensions between Bernie Sanders and Hillary.
And don't forget Jill Stein. And also, you had all the liberals showing up at the anti-Trump rallies run by the Russians. That's fun.
And my favorite part of all this is the blacktivists. They go after the minorities, and they say to minorities and stuff like, oh, yeah, blacktivists and black people who are woke would never vote for that devil Hillary. And they make black people threatening so that the Trump people then are afraid that the black people are going to take over with Hillary. I mean,
okay, I just got to respond to that.
Very injustice.
We're already doing that to ourselves in a 10 times greater scale.
But that's why we should be kinder to each other.
True.
As Americans.
That's true. No, but let's not let Fergie sing us to sleep at night. Ahead, Fergie giving Roseanne Barr a run for her money with the most widely panned rendition of the national anthem yet. Stay with us.
If you have moderate to severe plaque psoriasis,
stand what they were hearing. Fergie's rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner is getting scathing reviews on social media. Even many players on the court were taken aback.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
Oh, my gosh.
So, the singer has given a statement to TMZ. Last night, I wanted to try something special for the NBA. I'm a risk taker artistically, but clearly this rendition didn't strike the intended tone. I love this country, and honestly, I tried my best. Jesse, I could not sing at all. I don't sing ever. So
we know.
Right. So I'm not going to sing, but
I'm worse than you.
That's pretty bad.
I am the worst singer of all time. I never sing, and I would never allow myself to sing in front of you or anybody at this table.
You dance better than you sing.
Well, that's not saying much.
Correct.
And the only time I sing is in church, and it's embarrassing. I would say this. I don't like it when people take liberties with the anthem. I think it's such a great song and such a perfect song that I don't want to hear your spin on it. I want to hear the anthem, and a lot of the times the artists make it about themselves when they do their little twists and turns with it. Just keep it about the anthem, keep it about the country. Ben Shapiro had the best tweet. He said, it was like if she had knelt during the anthem. It was worse than that.
What do you think, Juan?
I like Charles Barkley's comment when she said, after that, I need a cigarette. I guess she was trying to be bluesy, sexy with it, but it really didn't work for me. And I love the cutaways because the players obviously didn't work for the people who were listening right there. And you think this is in Los Angeles. They could have gotten tremendous talent, because I think
she's
there are
very
lots
good
of
singer. Normally,
Yeah,
I don't know
normally.
what happened here.
But I think there are lots of renditions of the national anthem that are a little bit different, and sometimes I'm thrilled with them. I mean, obviously, I think what Marvin Gaye, Jimi Hendrix, I just think those were great.
Do you think this could have been one of those times, Greg, where nobody in her entourage or in her bubble wanted to tell her it wasn't great?
It's one of those problems I have with my entourage. They will not tell me, and I'll go out and do something, you know, and I'll embarrass myself, and I go, why didn't you tell me? I go, Greg, we can't. You know, I actually have to give her credit for knowing all the words.
Oh.
So that's good, and she reminds me of my drunk aunt. Like at a wedding reception karaoke, you know, in her head, she sounds fantastic. But there's other thing. This is what society has mistakenly identified as sexy. You know, this kind of like, ooh, it's like.
Do that again, please. Please do that again.
Like Gilligan's Island, it's supposed to be ginger, but actually it's kind of like Marianne.
Like sultry.
Yeah, but like it's like fake sultry.
Are we doing this role playing again?
Yes, no, but acting sexy is never sexy. It's, you know,
Right.
It's confidence and self-assurance that is kind of alluring, but not this kind of like, ooh. She was like Marilyn Monroe doing the Happy Birthday.
Yeah.
But I got to give it, you know what? I like the fact that she took a risk.
My fondest wish is that somebody makes a gif of Greg doing that thing he just did. Kimberly, last word.
Yes. You know, I feel for her. I think she's actually a very good performer and singer. This did not hit the right note. She figured it out already. So I think she should get a do-over.
Yeah,
Get
that's
a
not
mulligan.
do-over.
With
That's a
Roseanne.
do-over.
Her and
Absolutely.
Roseanne on tour.
Well, Roseanne has taken advantage of this and has said, now, you know, not as bad as what I did.
No, she's second worst. Awesome. All right, Oprah interviewed voters last night, and it got President Trump all riled up. Next.
My whole world when you came and hit me like a hurricane.
Guys, I know it's so hard.
Look at her, she's a bad mama jamma.
Oprah Winfrey's been shutting down rumors about a run in 2020, but she challenged President Trump on 60 Minutes last night as she was interacting with some of his supporters.
Who here believes that he made the comment about, quote, whole countries?
He did not say the Haitian people or the people of Africa. He said those countries.
Come on, Matt. Polls are showing that respect for the United States is eroding around the world. There have been some members of Congress, including Republicans, questioning his stability and fitness for office. Do you think the president is held to a different standard when it comes to this issue of sexual harassment?
Yeah, the question is, are these accusations credible?
The president was watching, and he had a lot to say about it on Twitter. Quote, just watched a very insecure Oprah Winfrey, who at one point I knew very well, interview a panel of people on 60 Minutes. The questions were biased, slanted, the facts inaccurate. Hope Oprah runs so she can be exposed and defeated just like all the others. End quote. Gregory gets a kick out of this. Go ahead.
I do.
Funny, right?
What does he do it? Because A, it's fun and it requires minimal effort for maximum impact.
Yeah.
Like that took him a minute to write, and it delivers a day of like magical chaos. But he's got to be careful because this is what happened to him at a correspondence dinner. People mock him, and then he became president. The other point is you usually expect a person to hold back on Oprah because she's wildly popular African-American woman.
Yeah.
He's the least aware of identity politics of anybody on the planet. He just doesn't care. He'll make fun of anybody. I mean, he'll go after. Virtue signaling is not in his DNA. I don't think it is.
He went after Gold Star families.
I mean, yeah, he doesn't. It's like
he doesn't care. He's got to defend his brand.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried that he's watching 60 Minutes on a Sunday night. I'm not sure if that's the best use of his time, but I understand the strategy. Because instead of giving a huge speech and wasting 45 minutes, he can send out a tweet and create this narrative where he's seen as the victim and the media is seen as trying to get him. Yeah. And I understand why, though. I'd be sensitive, too. It's funny he's calling someone else insecure, but he is, when it comes to protecting himself, he's the only president to fight back against the biased media. But you have a celebrity that comes out who endorsed Hillary, who endorsed Barack Obama, and then hurling slanted questions at Trump supporters. I don't mind if CBS is tough on Trump, but they're only tough on Trump. They don't treat people of different parties the same. I don't care if you're tough on Republicans, but be tough on Democrats. Or if you want to do softer, more personal interviews with Democrats, do some with Trump, too. There's no balance at CBS, and they have a poor track record. They tried to get Bush with the forged documents on the eve of the election. Remember, they edited out that Benghazi comment by Barack Obama that was pretty critical. So, you know, CBS is in the tank. We know it. And obviously, Trump's a fan, though.
So, Dana, what did you think of the questions?
Well, I wrote down that I'm curious about the assignments that they're giving Oprah, because I didn't think that she would be doing as many political segments for 60 Minutes when she was announced, because we haven't really seen her in mainstream media for a long time. She has, of course, her cable network, the OWN network, but I want to listen to her. I usually like the questions, but I could see why somebody would think that just does not. There's a divide there, right? There's an obvious a bias that comes into it from both sides, right? Everybody's suspicious of each other. I admire her for going, and maybe we'd hear from her personally how she feels about that. If I were the president, I would focus on hobbling people that are really going to run, like John Kerry, who's thinking about it, and Bernie Sanders. I would cut their legs out from under them before they get going.
Oh, Dana. So, but Kimberly, but this was a group put together in Michigan, you know, swing state, by Frank Luntz, the conservative pollster. And what you have here is this group had been together before. They come together again. She's asking questions about polling that shows eroding support for the U.S. overseas, about questions, people in Congress questioning the president's stability, the comment about the African, Caribbean, and Latin American countries. Do you see that as biased, or you see that just a journalist asking a question?
Well, obviously, the president, the eye of the beholder, he felt that it was biased against him, that these were inflammatory and slanted to elicit a poor response about the president. So, as you saw, quite quickly, he reflexively reacted on Twitter to denounce it. Yeah, I'm not really sure what's going on here in terms of, it seems like they're positioning Oprah a little bit in terms of, like Dennis said, you know, the assignments and the coverage and the topics and stuff that she's doing. So, you know, I look at this a little bit through a very clear
But it is good for both of them, right? Everyone's talking about Oprah and Trump today.
All right. It's being called the cruise from hell. You won't believe what reportedly set off. I mean, it's unbelievable. A violent, bloody brawl on a South Pacific cruise. That's next.
And as long as I got my suit and tie, I'ma leave it all on the floor tonight.
Family vacations can sometimes get tense, but I've never seen anything like this. 23 members of one family were kicked off a Carnival cruise ship in Australia after engaging in brawls with other passengers for days. This one's unreal. It's not clear what set this off, but the initial fight may have originated from someone stepping on another passenger's flip-flop. Other guests on board reportedly locked themselves inside their cabins to escape the violence.
Oh.
Something tells me, Greg, you would be the one locking yourself in the cabin.
With a bottle of wine.
Yes.
They should have gone camping. Then it would really have been intense.
Yes.
Oh, look, I'm not.
Practice that.
This is finally something that's interesting about a cruise. I'm not. A cruise is essentially a mall/hotel on a moving platform. It's basically house arrest with a buffet. So when there's the result is you can't get away from the people you want to get away from, but this is actually better than the fake forced friendships you acquire on vacation, the quote vacation friends.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
has those.
Oh yeah, they're great, and you find out they're swingers and alcoholics.
Yeah. And you never keep in touch with them after the vacation. Yes. Juan, did you see the security guard? He was the one delivering a bunch of blows. I mean, he was stomping on some of these people.
Well, I don't understand what led to this level of acrimony.
Oh, yeah? Well, don't step on my flip-flop.
Is that it? Just a step on it. But anyway, no, so what I read was that there was a big family, and one big family then sort of nursed a grudge against another big family, and then it just blew up. So it's like a virus was spreading on this cruise. I've only gone on one cruise, and I did that as a favor to some friends at the Weekly Standard. And I got to say, I'm not a cruise guy because you're trapped in with the people. So if you get people who are violent or crazy or angry, you know, then I don't see that you have an out. That's why I don't like cruises.
I think the weekly Santa cruise might sell some more tickets if it got
like that.
A lot of action.
Really?
Kimberly, have you ever been on a cruise before?
No.
That doesn't surprise me. How would you have reacted if you saw that chaos?
No, but I have nothing against cruises except for noroviruses and, you know, some of the problems have happened or people getting thrown overboard or murdered or
You're going to tank the Carnival cruise stuff.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of a problem. I've been on big boats before, but not like this one. So...
It's usually only 4 people on that boat.
Yeah, only yachts for Kimberly.
But this is really out of control. I mean, I don't know, and you're sort of trapped there, right? Because what are you going to do, jump overboard to, like, get away from the melee? I mean, but it seems like security was like overindulging in stomp action.
That's you know that
so there's going to be lawsuits.
Looked a little
lots
rough.
of them. Yeah.
Have you ever been on a cruise?
I've never been on a cruise, and I don't think that I could. I don't think I have 23 members of my family that I could pull together.
Extended
Small
family. Can your family fight? I mean, could they throw down like that?
No.
They bite. They bite.
You know, Carnival is being asked for refunds, and they say we're going to do very little in terms of refunds.
Yeah, I wouldn't refund them their money. No way.
Maybe we should do a 5 cruise. You know, we charge people a lot of money. We can all go on a big boat together.
That is the worst
Sound like a good idea?
I've ever
We did the 5 bus tour.
That is a great idea. That is a great idea. I will go on that.
Are you joking?
I'd be on a lot of pills.
He'd go for a speaking fee.
All right, yes, if the price is right. One more thing is up next.
So true.
Entrepreneur.